Welcome to the walkthrough for Assignment 3 in my CS courses on Scalable Microservices in the spring of 2024. First, keep in mind that code that is not documented thoroughly will not be reviewed. We've gone over this every single time. I do frequently make mistakes. People still don't document the code, so you're not getting comments on that code. Let's take a look at some of the problems with ParallelFlux API. First, don't be putting the ParallelFlux prefix here. I'm not sure why that's there. This method is named incorrectly. You should know how to name it by now by looking at the results that come back when you try to compile it or run it. This method is also named incorrectly. Down here, this method is named incorrectly, and it's also using the wrong annotation. This is something you should be able to do by using ChatGPT. This is using the wrong suffix for getExchange here. You don't need to be putting the search query for the recommendations proxy. This is the wrong annotation for watch movie. This is the wrong annotation for max count. Once again, ChatGPT will help you out and figure out how to do this. This method is missing a parameter. This is using the wrong method name. This is using the wrong suffix for getExchange. Again, there's no search query for the recommendations. This is using the wrong annotation for the first parameter. This method is putting timed in the wrong place in the post exchange, and there's also a bunch of other parameters that are being passed incorrectly to post exchange. Again, ChatGPT will help you out, and or for things like putting timed in the right place, just need to go back and look at your previous assignments. And this is missing a second parameter. So lots of people had problems with the proxies, very straightforward to implement, especially if you use ChatGPT. Down here, people are still carrying over mistakes from previous assignments. Something important is missing here in the movie class. This is something you should have fixed earlier. For the Get Database API, you're supposed to be using retrofit methods here, not the HTTP interface client methods. So that's wrong. Down here, sort of the opposite problem. You're supposed to be using the HTTP client proxy mechanism, not using retrofit. Not sure why that's happening, but you need to think carefully about what you're doing and not just kind of cut and paste things blindly. Down here, there's no need to use local variables. Just have this return the result directly. Local variables don't make the code any clearer. It makes it less clear. This implementation is very complicated and doesn't fulfill the specification comment above. So take a closer look at that. It tells you pretty much exactly what to do. This is also too complicated. There's no need to use stream and sort it into a list here. It's very simple what you need to do instead. This implementation of getAllMovies has you use a helper method. You're not calling the right helper method. And there's also no need to call sort here, which is incorrect. This implementation is incorrect as well. So there's no need to pass all this extra stuff like stream and toList and so on. Just call keyset directly. That's all you need to do. Now let's take a look at the search method. This method is very incomplete and doesn't follow the specification comment above at all. Also, this call to sort is incorrect because you need to pass in a method reference so you can sort things by title, which you're not doing. Down here, you're not following the specification comment above. You're supposed to call a helper method, and this is wrong since it is not following the first specification method above, so there's extra things that need to be done. This operation is unnecessary if you follow the first specification comment, and there's no need to use a method reference here. You need to use a method reference here, not a lambda expression. You also don't strictly need to ignore case. There's no need to call distinct here. Moving on to get recommendations. This is way too complicated. I'm not sure what the heck's going on, but just return flux empty in this case. Down here, don't call sequential at this point since that defeats the whole purpose of using a ParallelFlux. And down here, don't call sort since that defeats the whole purpose of calling the method here. And by the way, this is the wrong method that's being called. There's two, you have to call the right one. Over here in get recommendations, this is the wrong helper method to use. If you use the right helper method, you don't have to call parallel or run on with schedulers parallel. Calling this operator is unnecessary in this context. You're missing something important here to convert this back to a sequential flux. No need to call ordered at all. And this is also calling the wrong helper method. You need to call the get recommendations a method that is intended to abstract away from this, and it's much cleaner. Let's take a look at some more problems with get recommendations that take a watched movie. This is not following the specification comment. Something's missing here. You need to call a single helper method here as per the specification comment above, not write all this code out in a verbose and repeated way. Down here, a lot of people didn't read the specification comment. You're not supposed to modify the watched movies parameter. It's considered bad form to modify parameters that are passed in to these methods. So make a copy that do what you need to be doing. This code down here also, I'm not sure what it's doing, but it's not fulfilling that specification comment. Don't use flat map here, use map instead. And in that case, you don't need to use flux just, it's much simpler. I'm not sure what's going on here, but this does not implement the specification comment above. It's not sorting things correctly. Some more problems here. This implementation also doesn't fulfill the specification comment because you're making modifications to the temp movie key set. It's just unclear what the heck's going on here. So make sure you're careful with that. Down here, you need to go ahead and use contains key instead of get and use filter instead of map. No need to call this filter call at all. And you should be using distinct instead of flat map here. Moving on to some more problems. Please use a stream, not a parallel stream. The list of watched movies is likely not to be very large, so parallel stream is overkill. There's no need to call filter with objects non-null. Please use a method reference here instead of a lambda expression. Make sure that the movies are distinct. Use toList, not collect toList. Down here, you're using the wrong parameter. You're passing in the parameter that was done before you removed the items. So that's going to fail. You don't need to call this operator here at all. There's no need to call filter. You don't need to call sort here. And that's, of course, because you're going to be doing the appropriate sorting of things here or the returning of the right number of values. This is the wrong method to use, by the way. Don't use heap here, use the other one. And then finally, down here, something important is missing. After you call .parallel, you have to tell it what schedule to run on, and that call here is in the wrong place. So this needs to be moved up to there. So those were the problems I saw when I reviewed assignment 3. There's a lot of things for some people to fix. Make sure that you go back and fix problems that arose in your earlier solutions as well. I didn't spend as much time reviewing those because I had reviewed those in previously frequently made mistakes, but you're responsible for making sure that your final submission for assignment 3, which is due, I think it's next Friday, contains fixes for all the problems that have been identified by the unit test. If you fail to do that, then you'll lose a lot of points. Likewise, you absolutely have to make sure that your code compiles. A lot of people's code didn't compile, so I didn't get a chance to review it thoroughly. So you are responsible for making sure that your code is properly compiling and fixes unit tests. As always, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to come to office hours and/or ask them on Piazza.